Good news for the 49ers ahead of the Titans game. Christian McCaffrey back out on the practice field, full go. He exited about 10 minutes in on Thursday and then was listed as a limited participant due to illness. I saw Christian in the locker room. Looked like he was a little sick. I mean, it didn't look dire, and it appears he got some fluids in him and is now good to go. Kyle Shanahan even said on Thursday afternoon that Christian McCaffrey would be good to go for Sunday against the Titans. That is now confirmed. This is a video from Matt Barrows, who took it at practice today. That's Christian McCaffrey warming up at 49ers practice. So credit to Matt for that. Look, we could even give video credit to Matt Barrows here down at the bottom of the screen. So not as much of a big scare as week one, which was the Achilles scare for Christian McCaffrey. I believe they said calf, but everybody was worried about an Achilles there because of the Achilles tendonitis from 2024. This time, just an illness. Christian McCaffrey, though, back out on the practice field. Everything is good ahead of 49ers Titans. As expected, there will be no Yetur Gross-Matos for the 49ers this weekend. He just returned to practice yesterday. They're going to slowly ramp him up to make sure that there is not another reversion of that calf or that was a hamstring injury for Yetur Gross-Matos. So maybe expect him to be out on the field again for a game against the Indianapolis Colts. That's not until Monday, December 22nd. 10 days from now, the 49ers could get their best interior pass rusher back. He is back at practice, looked explosive yesterday. I did show you a video that I got from that Thursday practice of Yetur Gross-Matos. The players who have been ruled out for this Titans game, the expected suspects, including Yetur Gross-Matos, but no Nick Martin, still in that concussion protocol. Tatum Bethune, high ankle sprain. Sam Okawanu, high ankle sprain. And Eric Kendricks is not going to play in this one. He doesn't have to be on the injury report because he is on the practice squad, but his calf was tight this week, and he's just generally working his way back into shape and will not be in uniform for the 49ers. They're not going to use an elevation on him if he's not practicing, and I think that you'll probably see Eric Kendricks back out on that practice field next week as he tries to acclimate. So the 49ers are going to be going in with Curtis Robinson as the Mike linebacker again against Cam Ward and the Titans. D. Winters is going to be the weak side linebacker. Luke Gifford is going to be the strong side backer with no Nick Martin. He is in concussion protocol. No surprises, including Kyle Juszczyk, who has been cleared to play. Broken rib in Cleveland. Told me after the game that he was going to be good to go after the bye week. That is true. Kyle Juszczyk is good to go. Yes, it probably takes a little bit longer than just 2 weeks for a rib to fully heal, but he can wear some protection, and obviously there are painkillers that usually do go into the body in these cases. Juwan Jennings played with, 5, 6 broken ribs. Those are fully healed. We've seen better play from Juwan Jennings ever since he has put that rib injury into the rearview mirror. And now the 49ers aim to move to 10-4 in this game against the Tennessee Titans. I thought this was a good quote from Kyle Shanahan about Ricky Pearsall. A lot of people just assume that because a player isn't performing for their fantasy team or isn't delivering in the standard context of yardage, that that player's confidence could be shaken, or that the coach needs to go and have a message for him to help bolster him up. And I think a lot of these assumptions always neglect the fact that football is a team sport. So when Kyle Shanahan was asked about Ricky Pearsall and a potential needed boost, because we know that Pearsall only has 5 catches ever since his return from the knee injury, 20 yards over the past 3 weeks. Kyle Shanahan was asked about it today, and I thought had a very, very good answer.
Ball when I know how much you guys are hounding him for not getting the ball. Those are the things that I don't need to tell a guy that if I go up to a guy and say, hey, don't worry, I still have confidence in you. So when someone comes and says that to me, I'd be like, wasn't worried you didn't. What the hell happened? I hope my wife never tells me that for no reason. I think she genuinely likes me. So no, I don't do that at all, but I do feel for guys big time in this day and age and just how that stuff goes, that they got to answer to a lot of stuff and all about stats and everything. And this is a different sport. There's 22 people on the field, and stats get a lot of people attention in a good way, and they also get people the attention in a bad way. But when it comes to our world, the football world, and what we do in these rooms and watching film, there's no need for me to explain anything. He understands it.
And Ricky Pearsall, I think, is going to be a much bigger part of the stat sheet moving forward. I've said throughout this entire season, not just with the current Ricky Pearsall lack of productivity, I've said throughout the entire year, this is a rhythm receiver. It takes him time to find full integration within the offense. You'll remember over the course of the summer, I kept on pointing to the last 2 games of 2024 where Ricky Pearsall went off. I think might have been 14 catches for 210 yards over the final 2 games of 2024, if I remember correctly. That was the stat that I kept on citing. And it was, he had gotten shot in the chest at the start of that 2024 season. So he had to recover from the gunshot wound. He had to get back out on the practice field. Then he had to get back out on the game field. And then he had to establish rapport with his quarterbacks. I don't just say quarterback because the 49ers had to go through multiple quarterbacks last year. It was Purdy, it was Brandon Allen, it was Josh Dobbs. And then finally, he hit his rhythm in the final 2 games of the season. He had his receivers coach, Leonard Hankerson, chew him out in the third to last game of the season at Miami. And then he went off against the Detroit Lions. It was a Monday Night Football game at Levi's Stadium where the 49ers scored a lot of points. And he continued to go off against the Arizona Cardinals back home in the final game of that nightmarish 2024 season. My prediction was that Ricky Pearsall would carry that momentum into 2025, and he absolutely did. The first 4 games, he was one of the best receivers in all of football. Then he hurt his knee. It's no coincidence that the long, uninterrupted stretch of practice and game time for Ricky Pearsall led to very good numbers because of the rhythm and the cohesion that he was able to build within the 49ers offense. It's no coincidence, I think, that after a month and a half layoff with that week 4 PCL injury, he has not yet put up numbers upon his return. But I would expect, based on past history, the further Ricky Pearsall gets away from the return date, the more time he's had to integrate with the 49ers roster, the better the production is going to be. And perhaps this weekend against the Tennessee Titans will mark that big-time return to productivity for Ricky Pearsall. The 49ers need it. We talked about it this morning. They've got to have a wide receiver above 2 yards per route run. Pearsall was at 2.26 early in the season. Somebody asked me earlier today about one of my tables, and I could put the table up on the screen here to show you guys. It was a good question in the comment section. I haven't been able to respond to the comment section. Hopefully that viewer is able to watch this show. He asked, what is the delineation between red and blue? Because blue is above average and red is below average. The league median, I always get the league median for some of these stats. For yards per route run, it's about 1.7 yards per route run out of all pass catchers. This is receivers, tight ends, and running backs. So anybody above 1.7 is shaded in blue. The further above 1.7, the darker the blue is. Anybody below 1.7 yards per route run is shaded in red. The further below 1.7, the darker the red is. As you can see, Pearsall's at 1.53, so he's shaded in red below that league median. The 49ers saw him at 2.27 over the first 4 games of the season when he was more heavily involved in the offense, and they'd like to see him return to around that level. And then, you could talk about Christian McCaffrey. I know that we are today since he was back full go at practice today. Look at the sheer volume for Christian McCaffrey. This has been the 2 yards per route run is really good for a running back. That's a good receiver like number. And you have to remember that he's catching shorter passes, so it's harder for him to bump this number up. But he's been so consistent. He's an automatic yak machine. He catches and he either moves forward or falls forward. Christian McCaffrey is unbelievably skilled when it comes to generating as much yardage as possible. But they've been using him 107 targets. He's got more catches, 85, by a large amount than anyone else has targets. in this 49ers offense. I mean, Jawan Jennings has been the most targeted wideout and the most targeted player outside of Christian McCaffrey. Only 69 targets. McCaffrey has 85 catches, 806 yards, and there's a chance that he either reaches 1,000 receiving yards or 1,000 rushing yards because he's at over 800 rushing yards as well. But there's a chance that he reaches one of those two milestones this weekend. He's not going to go 1,000 this weekend, but he can set the table for going 1,000 as soon as the following week on Monday Night Football, national television against the Indianapolis Colts. He is less than 200 yards away in both receiving and rushing. And again, if Christian is able to accomplish this, he'll become the first player ever to go 1,000 twice. Right as we're talking about Roger Craig being a finalist for the Pro Football Hall of Fame, Roger better get in this year because he was the first to do it, 1,000 in the 1980s. He changed the game. He paved the way for guys like Marshall Faulk, who came along about 10 to 15 years later, and then for Christian McCaffrey, who came along about 2 decades after that. McCaffrey went 1,000 in 2019, which was 20 years after Marshall Faulk went 1,000 for the greatest show on turf, Rams. And now McCaffrey is very likely to go 1K again in 2025. Would be a hell of an accomplishment, especially considering the fact that he's had to carry this 49ers offense when it comes to the target share, when it comes to the catch and the yardage share. I mean, nobody else has over 458 receiving yards on this team. And here's McCaffrey, who's also going to have a 1,000-yard rushing season with 806 receiving yards. What he is doing is unprecedented. Again, there's only been 3 1,000 seasons in NFL history. McCaffrey is one of them. So there are probably going to be 4 after this year in all of NFL history, and McCaffrey will own 2 of those 4. I mean, first ballot Hall of Famer, no question. You are seeing greatness out on the practice field. I know that because of this production, he's really important to people's fantasy teams. That's why we watch Christian McCaffrey every single time he sneezes, because people are very, very invested in if this guy is going to play or not. Yes, he is going to be out on that field for the 49ers on Sunday against the Tennessee defense that isn't very good. So it's a chance to accrue some big yardage for Christian McCaffrey. Going to be a lot of fun to watch the 49ers back out on the field this week because just the sheer fact of rested team for the first time this season. It took a good 13 games for the 49ers to finally hit the bye week. You know, they had 15 missed tackles against the Cleveland Browns. I always talk about missed tackles as a number that you want to keep in single digits. Under 10 missed tackles and you're good. 15 was a lot against Cleveland. Missed tackles are directly correlated with fatigue. The 49ers defense was clearly getting fatigued. I don't know if you remember in 2023, the 49ers started 5-0, and then they lost 3 straight games at Cleveland, at Minnesota, against the Cincinnati Bengals. That game against the Bengals, they had about 18 or 19 missed tackles. It was getting brutal from a missed tackle standpoint. And the good news for the 49ers is they were about to enter their bye week. And they came out of their bye week and they were suffocating defensively. They didn't miss tackles against Jacksonville. And then they went on a run that season all the way to the 1 seed, all the way to the Super Bowl. So the correlation between fatigue and missed tackles is real. It's a number that I'm going to be watching really closely against Tennessee this weekend. Tony Pollard went off for about 160, 170 rushing yards in the Titans' win over the Cleveland Browns. 49ers are going to have to play the type of run defense that this team has exhibited most of this season. They're number 7 EPA against the run this year after being number 29 last year. If they can shut down the run or at least slow the run in decent fashion, it is almost impossible for them to lose this game against Tennessee. They've got a big, big edge against the Titans, but they do have to take care of business from a run defense standpoint. Christian McCaffrey being available should help the 49ers take care of business from an offensive standpoint. You just have to find a way to block Jeffrey Simmons. Simmons, one of the best players in football. We talked about him during the trade season. Unfortunately for the 49ers, Jeffrey Simmons was not available. He's one of the players that Tennessee has decided to make a foundational pillar. I don't blame them, but they could have gotten a haul in return for Jeffrey Simmons had they traded for him. Let's hear Kyle Shanahan talk a little bit more. A lot of you have asked about Jacob Cowing and, potential speed that the 49ers need, the wide receiver position. Shanahan gave the update on Cowing here and just a little bit more context on receiver.
The more speed on the field you have, the better. So when you're missing a lot of guys who can run, guys that you're possibly counting on, that definitely affects everything. And when you look at, just some of the things you said as a whole, I think our pass game has done a lot of good things, numbers-wise and things like that, and help us win a bunch of games. But it's not just offense either; it's defense also. When you're missing guys who can really run, that does have an effect. If you have all guys out there who can just fly around, but they're that physical, then you'll see some huge effects otherwise. To be successful in this league, you need a little bit of everything.
As far as Cowing, is he back to full health? I mean, I realize that there's no spot for him on the 53 right now, but is he, or at least
as soon as he's back to full health, we'll open up his window. Yeah, so he's not quite there yet, but he's getting close. He's got to pass a few more markers.
So anybody coming back from a hamstring injury, and it sounds like Jacob Cowing's was severe, they have to hit certain markers on the GPS measurements. And if you're not up to speed, then you're not going to be activated, much less have your practice window opened. So Jacob Cowing is getting close. Potentially the 49ers could open that window toward the end of the regular season. Then if there is a receiver injury, the 49ers could actually activate him. But it's about way more than just speed. You've got to be able to block. You've got to be able to deliver the underneath route tree. You have to be able to sing cohesively with the rest of this offense. That's what makes this offense what it is. It's been one of the most efficient in the league ever since Kyle Shanahan took over as head coach. He has major reliance on the adaptability and reliability of his wide receivers. I'm going to answer some questions. I know that it's a Friday afternoon. Shanahan went super late today. He said, sorry, guys, something came up. Didn't say what came up, but it was like an hour later than he normally is. So I decided to go live instead of just posting a video right after because I wanted to get this news to you a little bit quicker. The processing time, if you're uploading a video, is a little bit longer. Got to go get in the bay. Then we got to head up to Sausalito this evening, actually catching a ferry in an hour and 20 minutes. So I've got to get my swim in very quickly. That means you have to get your questions in very, very quickly. I'll be happy to answer them. How will Phillip Rivers do this weekend against the Seattle Seahawks? I'm not sure. I wouldn't hold my breath for a Colts victory. We'll put it that way. A 44-year-old quarterback coming out of retirement, resetting his Hall of Fame clock against one of the best defensive fronts in the league on the road. You would think that the Colts, if Rivers is starting, are going to play a lot of quick release and get rid of the football. You think they're going to rely heavily on Jonathan Taylor, but it took Brock Purdy's mobility to beat Seattle back in week 1. That's a bear of a defensive front. And Rivers obviously doesn't have that, especially at age 44. So I think that this is going to be a tough matchup for the Colts against the Seattle Seahawks. Post your questions. What is my impression of CJ West so far? I think he's getting better. I think he was a little overwhelmed when this first started, as you'd expect from any rookie. He's starting to gobble up and push back and stay anchored and rigid against some double teams. His snap count has grown, and that has been a reflection of the 49ers' growing confidence in him. CJ is a player who transformed Indiana's run defense almost single-handedly last year. He's had to learn how to anchor that big weight and that strength against NFL blocking. The technique is a lot better at the NFL level. Once he starts being able to handle that consistently against the run is when you could start to potentially see some pass rushing moves from him and some work on that front. I think that that's not going to be a blossoming until year 2. This is why this 2025 season is so valuable for the 49ers. They're giving these rookies seasoning, giving them that first taste of the NFL so they can go and work on some of this stuff with a base, a foundational base moving into the off season. So in the case of CJ West, he's now learning how to carry his leverage. He's now he's now accomplished that. You could watch the tape on a week in, week out basis. He's not getting pushed back anymore. In fact, when he's gobbling up some of those double teams, he's playing that out to a draw. He might even occasionally be pushing the double team back into the offensive backfield. Once that has been established, that is the first thing that you've got to check off. That is the foundation of playing a solid defensive tackle position. Once that's established, you could then start worrying about winning pass rushing moves. And I think that's the big next step for somebody like CJ West. Matthew Stafford couldn't make it to any championship games until he went to the Rams. Does that make him a system quarterback? Yes. Matthew Stafford is a system quarterback. Every NFL quarterback to ever play the game is a system quarterback because it is a team sport. There has never been a QB to ever play football who is not reliant on the system in which he plays. The most casual take ever is anyone trying to call a certain quarterback a system QB without realizing that every single QB to have ever played, from Joe Montana to Tom Brady to Andrew Luck, is reliant on a system and is therefore a system quarterback. It's a disingenuous argument. It's a stupid argument. It's a football ignorant argument. This is a beautiful sport because it's 11 men against 11 men. And there are so many different unique skill sets required within that 22 that it's essentially like guys are playing different sports, right? An offensive lineman has to have a totally different body type and skill set than a wide receiver. And a wide receiver is very different than a quarterback. But the quarterback is going to need the wide receiver. He's going to need the offensive line. He's going to need the running back position. He's going to need his tight ends. He's going to need all those positions to deliver their part of the system. They're all part of the larger system so that he can get his passing yardage. Another really stupid comment is, oh, that EPA, that's a team stat. What isn't a team stat in football? Passing yardage is a team stat. You know why? Because Matthew Stafford or Brock Purdy cannot wind up, throw the ball 20 yards downfield and catch it themselves. There has to be a teammate who catches that ball 20 yards downfield so that 20 yards is added to the quarterback's passing stats. So every single statistic that exists, there is no individual stat. Even rushing yardage for a quarterback is reliant on blocking. So every single stat that there is a team stat in football. The goal in football is to be successful within the context of your team. That's how you measure QBs. So something like expected points added per play, that is the stat that has some of the most context for how a quarterback operates within his system on his team. And therefore, it's one of the best stats to measure how well a quarterback is playing because no quarterback ever plays in a vacuum. Matthew Stafford's a system quarterback. Brock Purdy's a system quarterback. Andrew Luck was a system quarterback. Steve Young was a system quarterback. Joe Montana was a system quarterback. Patrick Mahomes is a system quarterback. They're all part of a system in the NFL. And anybody who says otherwise needs to actually learn and appreciate the sport. Any more questions? I think that's a good way to finish. I have to go swim. Everybody have a good one. That's your injury report ahead of the Titans game. Christian McCaffrey is full go.